So, about last week. This video is going to be a bit messy because it's slightly raw in its nature, but my emotions are measured and I'm going to be able to explain my feelings very calmly and hopefully in a way that all viewers will be able to understand. Last week, the European Broadcasting Union met at their General Assembly and held a vote. The vote was on two factors at the same time in the same vote. Voting yes meant that the member was in favour of both the recently announced changes to the voting procedures at the Eurovision Song Contest and in favour of Israel's 2026 participation at the same time. Voting no means no to both of those things, effectively. I'll first dive into the voting changes and then get to the crux of the issue of Israel. So, the voting changes involved better regulation on the advertising of entries in the contest, including the funding of those adverts to prevent what Israel have attempted in the previous years by the adverts being funded by the Israeli government advertising agency. They also restricted the number of votes per person, meaning you're no longer allowed to vote 20 times per payment method. On the jury side, each jury will now be formed of 7 members, an increase from the usual 5, and the juries will come from more diverse backgrounds and have an increase in jurors under the age of 25. The semi-finals will also switch from 100% televote to 50-50 again. These voting reforms have generally been thought of as a positive change, a step in the right direction. But the other of the two things being voted on is decidedly different in the public conscience. Firstly, the only reason those voting changes were necessary is because of Israel's attempts to manipulate the vote at previous contests. Secondly, we have the political situation where Israel, according to the United Nations, is committing a genocide in Gaza. Even the successful attempts to broker a ceasefire end up being violated time and time again by Israel. Only this week, an 11 and 8-year-old were killed by the IDF for allegedly crossing ceasefire lines, and only referred to as suspects by Israeli sources due to the obviously horrific nature of how it would sound if they told the truth. But that is what's happening. Hamas, of course, committed the atrocities on October 7th, 2023, and should be roundly condemned by the international community. But that is not an excuse to commit genocide. There's also the settler issue in the West Bank, which is not being properly dealt with. I do apologise, I hope that sound didn't come through. All of this has left a sick taste in the mouth for the international community, especially in the wake of the consistent shows of support for Israel from the governments of the likes of the UK and the USA, historical allies whose support seems to be unconditional to the point where not even a genocide and attempted invasion are conditions for allyship anymore. Israel should at this point be treated in the cultural sphere the same way Russia are treated, if not worse. And yet, none of that is happening because the Western world turns a blind eye to it. By treated the same way Russia are, I mean being removed from the Olympics, international sporting events, and of course my content's turf up until now, the Eurovision Song Contest. The last of those were seemingly the closest to doing so, but that has now not happened. The vote passed overwhelmingly with 738 members, not broadcasters but members, voting in favour, and 264 against, with 120 abstentions. This is, of course, a landslide, and so there's no way realistically that the vote would have gone any other way if the issue of voting changes was voted on separately. Though I would like to point out that had I been a member and the votes were separate, I'd have voted yes to the changes, but no to Israel's participation, and I'm likely not alone on this matter. The strength of feeling among those who voted against is a big issue, though, with multiple broadcasters of decent size threatening to withdraw if Israel were allowed to stay in the contest. This has now started to bear fruit. At around 5:25 p.m. UK time, the Netherlands, the sixth highest fee-paying broadcaster, officially withdrew. Not even 15 minutes later, Spain, a Big Five nation, also withdrew. That also affects Latin America, as RTVE, the Spanish broadcaster, apparently broadcasts Spanish language coverage of the contest to Latin America. So a chunk of the rest of the world vote is affected by that. Less than 10 minutes later, Ireland, the joint most successful country in the history of the contest, pulled out. Less than 10 further minutes and Slovenia had followed suit. This week, Iceland's broadcaster confirmed that they would also be leaving the contest. With 5 countries down, the number of participants is now 35. This, with Spain being one of the Big Five, would mean that there would be 15 countries per semi-final. The Barcelona Eurovision pre-party has also been cancelled, meaning the promotional events that artists do beforehand are also abandoning the ship. Participation in Eurovision is, of course, subject to a fee. You do have to pay your way into the contest. That's why Romania and Bulgaria left in the first place before they've now rejoined. And after 5 countries have withdrawn, their fees will likely have to be distributed among others to cover the costs. This could then push other smaller countries over the edge and cause them to withdraw for financial reasons. Those countries' costs go to others, and a vicious cycle repeats, ripping the contest apart from an already precarious position. However, it has been reported that the EBU have reassured NRK in Norway that the cost of participation is not going to rise imminently, essentially meaning the costs will be covered for now using whatever the EBU has in reserve. Now, as much as that will be a relief for some countries, the EBU's pockets aren't bottomless, and if this goes on for long enough, the spiral will continue. So, what happens to me then on this channel? I've already expressed pro-Palestine sentiments, albeit two-state, and I've already expressed my opinion that Israel shouldn't remain in the contest. So, naturally it's safe to assume I won't be watching Vienna 2026. Or at least that's my stance for now in case of things changing. And yes, that is true, that is my stance. But obviously, I'm doing this video. So what will happen to this channel instead? Well, there'll still be national finals taking place that I intend to look at, but also I will be over the next few weeks considering my next move, whether to perhaps make my content on a wider range of subjects moving forward. Firstly, on the national finals side, I've been torn since the results of the vote. I've decided to follow and cover the national finals this year, even though I likely will not be covering the main contest, because I feel it's unfair to punish the artists who have worked hard for this moment, only to have the impact potentially reduced by the actions of a different country's government and broadcaster. Take the example of the 12 of Portugal's 16 entrants for Festival de Canção, stating that they won't go to Eurovision if they win. It's important that we continue to give these people our support. As such, I hope to upload videos next week looking at Montesong and Festivali e Cangas. However, I respect the decisions of each and every one of the pro-Palestinian Eurofan community as to what we do next. I feel it's important not to abuse one another over the decisions we make in this troubling time. We've all had that feeling over the last week of not being sure what we feel we should do with regards to our viewing habits for this year. And we shouldn't frown upon others for having differing answers to those same questions. So, if you are boycotting, i.e. not following anything relating to the contest, including national finals, I see you and I respect your decision. If you're choosing to still go ahead with watching the contest, perhaps in hope that the result will be different from the obvious one we are all seeing in our minds right now, I see you and I respect your decision. It's important that we recognise this and stay united in our opposition to Israel's participation, even if we differ in what that opposition looks like. On the other content point, I live in the UK, and we have a big reality TV scene, and I'm a massive fan of shows like The Traitors. We have a new series in the new year, and The Traitors Ireland is going to be released on iPlayer any moment now. Might even be there by the time we upload this, so maybe we can look at that. I'm a football fan, a Formula 1 fan. Let's go Lando, by the way. A tennis fan. I'm Welsh, so maybe don't mention the rugby too much. So maybe there can be content on that sort of stuff in the future. The options are open, so I'm not entirely worried about that. For me, I have such a broad range of interests that I can pivot and still be fairly happy. But for many of us, Eurovision is and has always been a big part of our lives, the highlight of our years for so many years. When I first started watching Eurovision in 2013, I was 9 years old. I had no idea what any of this was about, but I saw Cosa Mostra for Greece and instantly fell in love with the complete craziness that this contest provides. It's been an incredible 13 years following this contest, and I have loved it from start to finish. But it shouldn't be a finish. And for some, choosing to make it a finish is going to be difficult, because they may not have such varied interests. To those of you who feel that applies to you, I hope you can still find happiness in whatever you choose to do, and that applies whether or not you join me or any others in national final season. It will be difficult going forward to accept that a source of happiness for so many of us has been ripped away and destroyed by the greed and aggression of the evils of this world. We'll see what happens, but hopefully the Eurovision community can stick together in these trying times. Just know that if you don't support the genocide in Gaza, you are welcome here. And you are valued in the Eurovision community. This may be a struggle, but it's one we should all face together. For now, but not forever, it's good night, Europe. Thank you for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.